The Suikoden series is hands down one of my favorite video game series of all time. It all started about 20 years ago when I was in a friend's basement, probably on a Friday night, actively shunning high school social activities for the wondrous glow of multiple televisions playing separate JRPGs being played side by side. I started the series in that basement with Suikoden 2 being my gateway game and quickly followed it up with its predecessor, Suikoden, on the Sony PlayStation. Over the years since, I have played all the mainline Suikoden games that came out during the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 era, as well as Suikoden Tactics, which, as a fan of Final Fantasy Tactics and Suikoden, seemed like a dream game made within my brain palace, and I will hopefully get to that game at some point in a future video. All this intro banner is just to say I really enjoy the Suikoden games, and if you, dear viewer, are a newcomer or a veteran to the series, I invite you to come along as I attempt to pay some video respect to the first game in a series that has given me many, many hours of entertainment throughout the years. Suikoden starts you off as Tyr Migdol, the son of the Imperial General Tio Migdol, having an audience with Emperor Barbarossa of the Scarlet Moon Empire, which works as Tyr's introduction into the ranks of military service. Your father, Tio, is about to head towards the northern border on the Emperor's behest, and Tyr is assigned under the charge of the Weasley Commander Craze. Tyr's first assignment is to head to Magician's Island to retrieve the astral conclusions from Lady Leknot and her snippy, never going to cause a problem for the world underling, Luke. I always used to read Luke's name as Luck when I was younger, and now have that in my head as the correct pronunciation every time I see it. Just one of those words that as a kid I never heard spoken out loud, so I pronounced it as Luck. It wasn't until 2002, 7 years after the initial release of Suikoden, that I was finally taught by Captain Janeway herself the error of my ways.
Admiral Janeway, how good to see you again.
Jean-Luc.
After returning, you are assigned to help retrieve taxes from the nearby town of Rockland, where cracks start to form in the otherwise pristine appearance of the Empire if you are to talk with some of the townsfolk during your visit. The party gets into a tough situation after being attacked by a monster, and Tyr's longtime friend Ted uses an odd rune to save the party. Not only did Tyr and his close compatriots Cleo, Pon, and Gremio see Ted's abilities in action, but also an Imperial official along for the ride named Kanan witnessed the event as well. As the group returns to Gregminster, Kanan asks Ted to accompany him back to the palace as he dismisses the rest of the party for the evening. Later that night, Ted shows up in the doorway of Tyr's home, wounded and near death. We find out Ted is the holder of the Soul Eater, one of the 27 true runes, and Wendy, the court magician for Emperor Barbarossa, is responsible for those wounds as she has been trying to track down Ted and take that rune as her own for over 300 years. Suikoden is one of those games that if it doesn't strike your heart with some feels, then you better start checking for a pulse because something may be wrong with you. This JRPG is a true tragic tale with so many of its characters struggling, fighting, and even dying for what they believe in. Ted asks Tyr to take the Soul Eater from him in a last-ditch effort to keep it out of the hands of Wendy, even though he is troubled that this rune will almost for surely bring suffering to Tyr in the future. During this time, Pon, a longtime bodyguard for the Migdol household, called the Imperial Guard, and Tyr is forced to flee his home as a fugitive as the new bearer of the Soul Eater rune. Along with his companions Cleo and Gremio, they are aided by a brash man named Victor in escaping Gregminster, and in return they agree to meet with someone in the nearby town of Lenin Camp. There, Tyr meets Odessa, the leader of the Liberation Army, who is fighting a rebellion against the Scarlet Moon Empire that Tyr is now a fugitive from. After some time, Tyr and company agree to help Odessa in her fight against the Empire, and sadly, the Suikoden tragedy monster strikes again with the death of Odessa during an Imperial raid on the Liberation Army's secret headquarters. At this point, we are really only about 3 hours max into Suikoden, and I have only spent maybe half that time knowing who Odessa and the Liberation Army actually are. And I think the writers have nailed how to make me care about so many things in this world after such a short time. As the story of Suikoden progresses, you acquire an abandoned castle in the middle of Lake Torin, which starts to work as the Liberation Army's headquarters, and really marks the start of the Suikoden series' staple of recruiting 108 Stars of Destiny. Not all of Suikoden's recruitable characters can be used as party members in battle, but those that don't fight have beneficial amenities that they can add to the headquarters. Characters can open up an item shop, an inn, there are multiple blacksmiths, an armor shop, a rune shop, build an elevator, a vault to store extra items, allow you to play minigames, paint a mural, and even build a bathhouse, to say just some of the things that these characters you recruit can bring to your castle. Not all of these characters and amenities are available right away, but throughout the course of the game you will be building the Liberation Army through both story-related automatic character recruitments and completely optional characters you find during your playthrough. And of course, there is a reward later in the game for recruiting everyone, but we'll come back to that when the time comes. There are actually 111 characters that can be recruited, but 3 of them don't count as the 108 Stars of Destiny for math reasons, I guess. 46 of those characters join automatically during the story progression in Suikoden, and the 65 other characters can be recruited through the game as you fulfill criteria, which can be as easy as just talking to them, or as laborious as running around the town you find them in to purchase sugar to trade for a yardstick to a villager, for salt to give to another, for soy sauce, for soap, so Sarah can finish her laundry and finally be done with her chores so she can now join a rebellion. Once established at the castle headquarters, the Liberation Army starts to slowly liberate the other regions around the Scarlet Moon Empire. Each region hosts intriguing plots either revolving around one of the 5 great generals of the Imperial Army or one of Lady Wendy's cohorts, and offers even more characters to add to your army. Tyr first aids in the fight against Kwanda Rossman, one of the great generals, who is being controlled by Wendy's Black Rune. Kwanda's burning mirror threatens to destroy the forest lands occupied by the ever-bickering elves, dwarves, and kobolds. Seeing 3 groups unable to work together to even save their own towns and lives is frustrating and almost too close to reality to be entertaining at times. This also brings on Suikoden's first major battle sequence, which pits the entirety of the Liberation Army's forces against a large section of the Imperial Army. This pretty much plays out like a game of rock, paper, scissors, where you can use a physical attack by charging the enemy, a bow attack, or a magical one. Magic beats charge, charge beats bow, and the bow attack in turn beats magic. If you decide your next move incorrectly, then it could mean more than just a loss or game over, however. You can lose recruited Stars of Destiny permanently during these battles if things go badly. As you recruit more characters, your options for major battles widen, with some other ancillary commands becoming available, such as a special Dragon Knight attack, the ability to beef up your charge attack, and even sending over a spy to find out what the enemy's next move will be. Once defeating Kwanda, the Liberation Army invades the region of the narcissist Milik Oppenheimer, another of the great Imperial generals who, like Kwanda, is also being controlled by the Black Rune. Tyr's party must deal with Milik's dangerous poisonous pollen used to keep his region under his control. Arguably one of the most devastating losses to your party befalls the group during this operation when Gremio is killed by Milik's flesh-eating spores, leaving yet another friend of Tyr's dead. Suikoden was the original Game of Thrones. They weren't afraid to kill anybody. After the whole Milik mess, Tyr's father, Tio, possibly the greatest of the 5 generals, leads a siege on the Liberation Army's castle against his own son. And let's just say the outcome for the McDowell family is heartbreaking at its best. At this point in the game, you have already participated in duel battles, but near the end of the siege, Tyr is forced to duel Tio. Dueling is a one-on-one battle where the player bases their actions off what the opponent says to them before their turn. During the duel, Tyr and the enemy duelist can either guard, attack, or desperate attack. You'll want to guard against a desperate attack to get a critical counter, but also if you decide incorrectly, your opponent can land a big hit on you and bring the duel to an early end. So pay close attention and maybe think about saving often. Tio is killed in this duel against Tyr, and I can safely say that the first time I played Suikoden, I did not expect that most of the main character's friends would die, and then he would kill his own dad. The Lorimar region is up next, and this area just happens to be occupied by a 500-year-old runic vampire named Necklord, who is working with Wendy to help her acquire the Soul Eater rune. This is one of my favorite sections of Suikoden. You get some great backstory on the warrior village where Flick is from, as well as learning about how Necklord had slaughtered Victor's whole village years before, and helping him put the organ-playing vamp down and liberating the region feels like a job well done. The Dragon Knights in the Northwest have had their dragons poisoned by Lady Wendy, and Tyr, accompanied by the man of few words Humphrey, learn of this during their recruitment visit. Despite not having anyone related to Tyr die in this section of the game, hearing Humphrey open up about the Calica incident is sad enough on its own, and just a solid build of world building, if I may say so. After Tyr and company assist in healing the dragons, Humphrey uses his connection with Joshua, the captain of the Dragon Knights, to convince them to aid the Liberation Army in their fight against the Empire. For all of you Suikoden 2 lovers out there, the city-state of Jostin makes a brief appearance, albeit in text only, as the Liberation Army captures Moravia Castle and another of the 5 great generals, Kasim Hazel. I really geeked out at this part the first time I played Suikoden since I had played them out of order, and just learning that these games are so interconnected brings a little joy to my heart. At this point, the Liberation Army has one more stop before they can infiltrate the imperial capital of Gregminster, burning down the floating fortress of Shazarazad. During the attack, Tyr and company are confronted by the final great general, Sonia Shulen, who seems to have been in love with Tio and vowed to take revenge on Tyr for taking his life. Furthermore, as the party escapes the burning fortress, a mortally wounded Matthew is found outside. And Sanchez, a man that has been around since the beginning of the war, turns out to be a long-time spy for the Empire. All the regions around the Imperial City are now under Liberation Army control, and it's finally time to march on Gregminster, the city Tyr originally fled as a fugitive, to overthrow an emperor who has fallen from grace. But before this happens, we get one last visit from Lady Leknot, and if you have recruited all 108 characters and none of them have died prior in major battles, a good thing finally happens to Tyr. Gremio is brought back to life by the power of Leknat's rune and the 108 Stars of Destiny. And after that, it's time for the Liberation Army to march on Gregminster and end this war. I suppose since we've talked about major battles and duels already, we better talk about the regular battle system in Suikoden. Throughout the game, you will have a party of up to 6 characters that fight in the more traditional JRPG manner. It is comprised of a front row and a back row of 3 characters each. Every character has a weapon that has a reach of either small, medium, or long, which means if you put a small reacher in the back row, they cannot do regular physical attacks to an enemy. Be mindful of this, since sometimes the game will make you bring a story character along with a small reach and then plop them in the back row, so in your next battle, all they can do is sit there and defend. Each character can also have a rune equipped to them which enables them to cast certain magics or use powerful skills. Some characters have runes already attached to them that cannot be removed, like Pawn and his Boar rune for example, but most have an open rune slot for you to allot as you please. Runes can also affect things outside of battle, as some decrease encounters with lower level enemies, increase experience gained after battle, or even allow you to run on the overworld. But this, of course, is at a loss of a usable rune in battle, so sacrifices may have to be made for convenience sake if you so wish. Unlike later Suikoden games, each character only has 1 rune slot, so your options are more limited. In battle, each character has the option to attack, defend, use a rune, item, or do a unite attack with another character. Unite attacks don't work with just any combination of characters, but when the right ones are in the same party, they can use a special unite attack specific to that team up. There are 25 different unite attacks in the game, so you'll either be using up a solid chunk of time figuring out who can unite with who, since the game doesn't tell you until you're in battle, or you can look it up. Some runes in unite attacks can cause characters to become unbalanced and lose a turn. During this time, they can defend and are still able to use items. So if you're using a character that gets unbalanced due to a move, then maybe stock them up with healing items so they can be useful during their downtime. But of course, stocking up a character with items can also be an issue in Suikoden. Each of the 6 characters in your party has only 9 slots to hold items, and this also includes the armor that they have equipped. If a character has equipped a helmet, armor, and 2 accessories, then there are only 5 available slots for that character to either bring items along or to store treasures found while out and about. Eventually you do get a vault at the castle where you can store things, but the inventory system would be better off in my opinion with just a shared bottomless bag. I haven't found a JRPG yet that benefits from a lack of inventory space. Notice how I didn't include weapons or shields in my item rant just now. Well, not very many characters can use shields in Suikoden, so that is just a rarer issue related to inventory depending on your choice of party members. But weapons are handled a little differently. Weapons are not bought or exchanged in Suikoden, nor do they count as a held item. Each character has their own unique weapon from the beginning, and it can be leveled up by using a blacksmith up to level 16. I can see some people being saddened that there isn't a large variety of weapons available or any ultimate weapons to acquire, but I think this system works well with the amount of characters you have to juggle throughout the game. There are blacksmiths in towns and 5 blacksmiths that you can recruit. Each one can only sharpen character weapons up to a certain level, so if you don't have all the blacksmiths, then no level 16 weapons can be obtained for your party. It also costs a fortune to sharpen each character's weapons to max, so money can either be an issue, or you can recruit Gaspar and play the dice game to make mad cash. Sharpening a weapon from level 15 to 16 for one character costs 70,000 gold alone. To just get all your final party members to have fully sharpened weapons, you will either need to be good at gambling, or sell some of your Bitcoin to finance the blacksmith's tab. As the party gets ready to enter the final dungeon, Suikoden, for a game that boasts 108 characters, does what I've always thought is a weird move. The game forces you to take Flick and Victor with. Now don't get me wrong, Flick and Victor are two of my favorite Suikoden characters in the series, but the game really cuts down on your final party choice for no real reason other than that they help Tyr escape a collapsing Gregminster palace after the final battle. And this could still have happened without forcing them into your final party. Along with Tyr, Flick, and Victor, my final party has changed pretty much every single time I've played this game. I have an affinity towards Peshmerga and his storyline with Uber. Humphrey just always looks like he was up for a fight. Of course, in the past I have brought along the resurrected Gremio. Kirkus joined once because I needed a character with a long weapon and he was already leveled up. Clive has a gun, so he's cool. And I almost brought Antonio, the pan-wielding cook, in an old Let's Play I did just for laughs. For my final party this time around, I went with Cleo, one of the original crew that fled Gregminster with Tyr, and worked as my main healer throughout the game. The last two members I had never played with before. First was Kai, Tyr's bow staff instructor. He and Tyr probably have the best unite attack in the game, especially when dealing with multiple enemies at once. And finally, the old mage you find hiding away in the clone cave, Crowley, who is said to have 100 runes embedded into his body, and is a beast of a magic user. The final battle against the Golden Hydra summoned by Emperor Barbarossa isn't too challenging if you have a strong party, and I would say one of the easier Suikoden final bosses in my memory. Afterwards, the party confronts Barbarossa and he admits to not being controlled by Lady Windy's Black Rune, but doing what he did because of his love for her. Then he hurls himself and Windy from the edge of the palace, extinguishing their lives, correcting his mistakes and marking the end of the Scarlet Moon Empire. In the aftermath of the war, the Tauren Republic is created in the stead of the Empire, and we are shown what the 108 Stars of Destiny did once it was all over. Even as a JRPG on the shorter side, around 25 hours, Suikoden brings so much life to its world and characters in that short time. If you haven't played it yet, then you should experience it for yourself, or if it's been a while since you've revisited the first installment of the series, a trip back to the Scarlet Moon Empire will not be a disappointment. Suikoden is proof that sometimes tragedy can be a good thing.